Hi, Andrew Silverman, tax analyst at Bloomberg Intelligence here, and I want to talk about my most recent note on the possible impact of tax direct punishments of universities. And let me share my screen so you can see what the note looks like. All right, excellent. So I start with the endowment tax the Republicans are debating in the one big beautiful bill. And we already have an endowment tax. It was adopted in the 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. So that's nothing new, but the House and Senate would significantly increase the rates of this tax, and they'd also create several new strata of tax rates. Under current law, it's a 1.4% tax and applies to any private university with an endowment above $500,000 per student. The House bill would create three new higher levels of tax for endowments between $750,000 and $1.25 million. That would be a 7% tax. $1.25 million to $2 million, that would be a 14% tax. And above $2 million, that would be 21%. The Senate bill just has two new strata, $750,000 to $2 million, 4%, and $2 million and above, and that would be 8%. And there really hasn't been a whole lot of hand-wringing about this on Capitol Hill. This tax, I think, is just bound to be increased. It's just a matter of how much, and I'd be willing to bet it's probably closer to the House version than the Senate version, given the revenue needs that the Republicans have in this bill. In the second bit, I talk about how it doesn't apply to all universities, just private universities, and this is absolutely key. Why would public universities be carved out? Because the U.S. Constitution bars the federal government from taxing the states, and public universities are part and parcel of the state in which they're located. And like I said, we'll get to that later. That's the last bit. But then the third bit, before we get to that, I talk about UBTI. That's the tax that's applied to tax-exempt entities. Just because a university is tax-exempt doesn't mean that it doesn't pay tax. In fact, tax-exempts can pay a lot of tax on unrelated business taxable income. And the reason that we have UBTI is because of a university, NYU, that had a pasta business and claimed that its income wasn't taxable by the federal government. Well, the courts disagreed with that. For-profit businesses owned by tax-exempt, the court said, were taxable. And just because a corporation is taxable doesn't mean that it pays a lot of tax or any tax at all. And I think universities could get a ton of deductions for the things they just normally do in their ordinary course of business, like research and development. In the fourth bit, I talk about the two biggest downsides for a university losing its 501c3 status. That's the loss of the deduction for donors contributing to a university and the loss of the ability to issue tax-exempt bonds. This is most certainly a big deal for universities, and I think that's probably what universities fear the most, not so much becoming a taxable entity. Wealthy donors don't just contribute cash, they contribute property, and sometimes that property can be a heck of a lot more, worth a heck of a lot more than the cash that they're contributing. Because when the property doesn't have a clear fair market value, there's a lot of flexibility for the donor to say how much the property is worth in order to maximize their charitable deduction. So, wealthy people contribute a lot of property, like stock or land or things like that to universities. And in terms of borrowing, the Ivy League universities actually have a lot of debt outstanding, and they have it in the form of bonds. So Harvard, for example, has $8.2 billion in debt, and that's comprised of $4.9 billion in taxable bonds and $3.3 billion worth of tax-exempt bonds. And it's unlikely that if Harvard loses its 501c3 exemption, that those tax-exempt bonds would suddenly become taxable, but clearly future bond issuances would all become taxable. And then I get to the last bit, and I got this idea from William F. Buckley, actually. He was criticizing Yale in his first book, God and Man at Yale, and jokingly said Yale was so political that it should just get absorbed into the state of Connecticut. And I was thinking about that, and I thought, that's actually a really good idea. Why not? As I said, states and state entities like pension funds and universities are what's called super tax exempts. That's essentially the tax exemption in the way that we all imagine tax exemption. It's not actually paying federal taxes. University of Michigan isn't a 501c3 like Yale or Harvard. Why? Because it shares the tax exemption of the state of Michigan. Yet Michigan's endowment is one of the biggest in the country, and it too can issue tax-exempt bonds. Michigan is also largely autonomous from the state of Michigan. So why couldn't the Ivies be absorbed into their states and get the same deal as Michigan? I really don't see any reason why they couldn't. And I think that really solves their bond and donor issues. It also solves their endowment tax issue. The tax only applies to private universities. So I think universities are not weaponless. They don't have it's not like they don't have backup plans to what the federal government is trying to do with taking away their exemption. Now, William F. Buckley, I think, would be horrified by this idea, especially for his university to be absorbed into the state of Connecticut. But I mean, if it preserves their ability to issue tax-exempt bonds and it preserves their ability to keep taking property and cash and give their donors an exemption from tax, I mean, why not, right? Okay, so thanks for listening, reading my notes, and I'll be in touch with you real soon about news stories that you can enjoy. Thanks again.